Welcome to the Elevate Your Event podcast, where we talk about how to plan and execute an unforgettable event that will dazzle your guests and generate more income for your organization. From fundraising and securing trendy auction items to event production and logistics, get the best tips and advice from seasoned fundraising and event professionals who have been in your shoes.
Welcome back to the Elevate Your Event podcast, where we talk about the various ways that you can make your next fundraising event even better than it probably already is. And so we have a special set of topics today. This is another one of those grab bag lists of things that are questions that have been filtered into us from you guys. Thank you, by the way, or things that our staff has come to discuss. And I think we've mentioned this before, but we do talk about how events run over the weekends. We do that as a team, typically on Tuesday mornings, because people need to recover on Mondays.
It's not event gossip, would you say?
Not event gossip.
Say it's not event gossip.
No. This is continuous improvement. That's what we call it.
Education.
Yeah.
It's actually some really good feedback that we get. Just sharing feedback with each other, we get some good feedback.
Well, let's introduce ourselves first. Jeff Porter, CEO, founder of Handbid, and we've got...
I'm Kristen Wheeler.
And I'm Inga Weiss.
Yeah, we've got an all-star cast for you today that are going to answer all of these questions that have come in. And absent Diana Duplanche, who is probably not outdoors today, I tell you, I feel like I live, no offense to people that live in Portland, Oregon, but you probably are used to it raining every day. We live in Denver, and it rains every day now. And so Diana's a big outdoors girl. So I don't know what she's doing today, but she's not with us. And she's normally the one with the list. Not only did I not have a list to start, I didn't have the pink pen that goes with the list, but I do have my blue pen, and I have the stuff that we were going to discuss, and I decided not to get nerdy and do it on my phone like I did last time. So what I've got here is I've got my impromptu paper and a blue pen instead, and I decided not to be nerdy this time and do it on my phone. I'm going to do it on pen and paper.
Here we go.
Isn't that amazing? And actually, Kristen did bring up a very poignant comment, which was, I'm surprised you found paper in the Handbid office, because normally the only paper we have lying around are auctioneers' bid cards.
That's right.
Paper in the office.
So anyway, okay. So the first one on here was a collection of things that our staff has observed over the last several weeks. We're calling this the do's and don'ts of the next auction. And so the first one on the list that came in from an observation was assigning seats. And this was a seated event. So I guess if you were doing just kind of a classic, maybe just throw some cabaret tables out and let people kind of float anywhere, it'd be one thing. But this was a seated event, but they did not assign seats. And so what ended up happening, so look at my notes here, but what ended up happening was they ran out of space. And so do you guys know why they ran out of space?
Well, I know, but it's because we talked about it before we came in here.
Okay, well, spill the beans.
Spill the beans, Kristen.
I would love to know the psychology behind this, but it's because if I walk up to a table where two strangers are already sitting, I'm not going to sit directly next to them. I'm going to leave a seat or two in between us.
Yes.
So that leaves like two free seats in between people, and then if typically you're attending as a pair, as a couple, that poses a problem because usually you want to sit together. And
That's
when
right.
you see single seats, people don't want to sit in single seats.
They don't.
And it makes it really awkward. Nobody wants to ask another person to move over.
Yeah.
Right. So this will probably get edited out, but this is also called the urinal theology. Have you heard about this? The
I've
theory
never
behind that?
used a urinal, so
Yes,
enlighten me.
that's why I was going to ask if you had heard about this, but it is true, and they did observe this, where you walk into a bathroom, if there are 5 urinals and someone's using one, no one will go to the one next to it, ever. They will always go one space away. Okay, so if there are 3 people using a 5-station urinal, there are always the 2, slot 2 and slot 4 are always open. And it's fast. They did this study for a long time, and they would add a 6th urinal and they would add a 7th urinal just to see kind of what it was like. People do not. It's really strange and uncomfortable. If there's one person in there, I would look at you funny if you came and stood next to me, right? And that's the same thing with these tables. Is that when we walked in, we finally walked over and started looking around at all of these people that are sitting down. Watch this the next time. right? You see it at conferences.
Right.
Where, everybody walks into the ballroom to sit at a conference and these chairs, or you see it at church where people leave spaces between each other and then, you're trying to pack more people in. You can't. And so what ended up happening, though, is they were getting charged by the place setting, this charity was. Okay? And so when you leave those place settings open
And add more.
and then have to add more tables, you're just going to pay more. And so,
more money.
yeah, assigning seats, I know it sounds like, does it create more work? It absolutely does, right? To go in there and put people at tables requires a little bit more effort. But at the end of the day, what you get out of it is you get way more efficiency in terms of your costs.
Assigning seats was always one of my favorite parts of doing galas. Like, call me weird and type A, but that was always like, ooh, we finally have our guest list. It's a couple of days before the event. It's time to do seat assignments. And I really enjoy that. Not only can you keep track of the people in your room and know who's donating and what's going on in the room, and like we've talked about before, educating your auctioneer on where certain people will be sitting, but it also, I think, helps to create a vibe in the room and helping to create that atmosphere of what you want at your event. So why wouldn't you want to assign seats to create that people love order, people love knowing exactly where they're supposed to be.
And it's just easier.
Yeah.
I actually think, I agree with you. I think it creates a better guest experience because then I don't have the stress of having to find a spot to sit. Right? I agree with you. And I think it is, but I see why people think that this is a better idea. It really isn't. Right, and it backfired in this particular case because they were how they were charged by this particular hotel. But outside of that, I think it also is stressful. Right now, you can go to and this happens at church with us all the time. Like you send your kids in, and then you're like, okay, did you not save us seats? Honestly,
Exactly.
So, it could be the same thing, right? Where you're walking around and you're like, oh my God, I wish I just knew. Or, your friends you make sure your friends save you seats if you do assign seats. And it's the Southwest thing too, right? Now, Southwest will tell you it's more efficient.
That's a big no-no. It's a big no-no. You're not supposed to be saving your seats for your friends on Southwest. Ooh, big no-no.
I have seen...
We got some people really mad at us.
Yes, I've seen fights get close to happening, but not fully happening, and they don't condone it, but they don't prohibit it.
Not supposed to.
Right. I think, but at the end of the day, like I think they've also fixed some of the issues with assigned seats because if my wife and I are ultimately going to sit next to each other, just let us board together. Honestly, like that way I don't have to put a bag in the middle seat next to me or whatever, right? And so I think it's the same thing with galas. Like just take the stress away of this is my seat, okay? The only person that would hate that would be my special needs daughter, and we don't take her to galas. So this is perfect.
Well, you could follow the Southwest model and be like, if you donated $5,000 or more, you're a part of A-List.
Should we put them
to sit near the front of the gala?
You get
in check-in groups? We should do a whole we could. You're in check-in group A. You're in check-in group B.
Thank you for your generous donation.
And there are a lot of organizations that actually do separate lines for
VIPs,
yes. VIPs and pre-check guests and all that.
Well, and I think in this case that would have been better because in that case your VIPs could have gotten in early, right? And what tends to happen is your VIPs go through a different process and maybe they're in a special reception area and they come in last, and this would have really been a bad situation for them. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just I would just say don't go the Southwest model on this one. Let's go.
Assigned seats.
Let's go with the assigned seats.
Elevate your experience.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so a question came in. Well, let's stay on this whole thing. So paddle numbers and why they're important. So when do paddle numbers matter and when do they not matter? And this was at the same event, and paddle numbers were assigned at the door. So when does a paddle number matter? It matters in two big instances in the room, which are live auction for sure,
and a paddle race.
And the paddle race. Okay. Other than that, if people are using their device, doesn't really matter. But in this case, our staff is going through and they're entering in live auction winners, and these paddle numbers do not exist in the system, but they're being held up in the air.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're relying on honesty at that point.
You're relying on
honor system.
hightailing it over and finding that person and finding out who are you because someone gave you a paddle number that they did not put into the system.
And then transferring all kinds of transactions invoices after event is over, which creates a lot of headache for auction managers.
Yes. So paddle numbers, like I said, in a lot of cases, if you're not doing a live auction, you're not doing a paddle raise, you're not asking people to hold a card up in the air, please make sure that you're assigning paddle numbers to people, or you at least know who they are. The backup to that is every live auction winner you need to go visit. Mm-hmm. And just like, let me confirm your information. I have you down. Your Kristen Wheeler. Is that correct? Right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, who knows? Maybe you accidentally picked up Inga's paddle number and held it up in the air, not knowing because you sat next to each other. And because your seats weren't assigned, you didn't know each other either.
Yeah.
So.
And that being said, pre-assigning seats, I love it. I think it definitely elevates guest experience. But pre-assigning paddle numbers to your guests is a bad idea in so many ways. But we also see auction and event managers not only pre-assigning paddle numbers, but actually placing them on the guest seat. And then as guests are shuffling around, sitting down, they grabbing each other's paddles, and they're having fun. It's not their job to pay attention, but they're actually raising a wrong paddle because...
Or they move and not
Or they move, or they do some musical chairs and switch seats because I don't want to sit to your husband, but you want to sit next to me. And the next thing you know, we are raising wrong paddle number because they were physically placed on your seat.
100% true. Paddle numbers do matter, and just make sure that you are out there, like, especially with live auction winners, you're just checking to see who they were. Okay. Any other comments on paddle numbers? Oh, make them big. These were nice because these were pre-printed, but there was a comment made at one of our events once where the paddle numbers were written on the back of a program, and like it was, half of an 8
blue ballpoint ink.
Yes.
Yes.
Pink on white.
And it's very fun to customize your programs and print your paddle numbers on the back of a program, but please don't print white paddle numbers on a green background or silver paddle number on a green. You can't see it.
It was navy on dark green.
You can't see it.
Just make it black and white. Your paddle numbers do not need to be on theme. If you want to put your logo in the corner, fine. But this is make them functional, not frou-frou.
Your auctioneer will thank you.
Yes.
Well, let's keep deep diving on this because this is a good topic. So we were going to move on, but we're going to stay on paddle numbers for a second because to your point also, when you say functional, okay, like they also keep it like these ones that were like navy blue font on like a dark green like design was behind them. Mm-hmm. They were massive.
Yeah.
Like they were bigger than like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. What in the heck is someone going to do with that thing? You know what they're going to do? They're going to fold it in half and shove it under their plate probably. Mm-hmm. So they were a little overwhelming. And I get it. You're like, well, I'm making these huge paddle numbers. They're going to be great. You still couldn't read them. But outside of that, like when you say functional, make sure your bidders can handle them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now there was an auctioneer in town in Denver years ago, and great auctioneer. Older guy, and so his eyesight was kind of failing him a little bit. And he was telling me this hilarious story where he's like, he noticed, right? Like even the standard paddle number sizes, people fumble with them, right? The females bring up clutch purse and they're trying to shove it in there, and they don't have any pockets, right? And guys want to fold it up and put it in their pocket. They don't carry it around. And so he decided to create these paddle numbers that would slide directly in your pocket, especially like in your sports coat jacket pocket. Yeah. They were awesome, okay? But the numbers weren't that big, and so he couldn't see them. And so we were running around helping him. But, it was one of those things where, it's going to be a trade-off, right? They got to be big enough to see, but definitely make them functional if you can.
And, all these people that we're talking about in the room going to the bidders, we call those spotters, and those can be volunteers. That was actually my very first job at a gala was as a volunteer. I was a spotter, and they are there to do just that, to help the auctioneer see who's raising their paddle, to help them call out the number, to go with a form and say, thank you so much for your winning bid. Let me just jot your information down. So that's a really important volunteer position to have.
It is. And I will tell you, like, there's some training involved in that. So for appeals, maybe not as much. You just got to be able to read numbers and write fast, right? Because as the auctioneer is calling these numbers out, you got to get them down as like a bid recorder or something like that. But in a live auction, that spotter is a very important role. And in the event I was at recently, they did not have one. They didn't have any. And so here's the auctioneer. I liked the layout. The stage was in the middle, so he's basically surrounded by guests. The PA system was terrible. That didn't help. And he wasn't doing the best job of turning his head around and looking.
Right.
That's why you need bid spotters. And so you needed 4 bid spotters. You needed 4 quadrants and 4 people out there. And their job, I think professional auctioneers call them ringmen.
Ringmen.
Yeah. Ring women? I don't want to offend anybody.
Just ringmen.
person.
Just
Okay.
ringmen.
Okay.
We had a huge debate about this last year with fellow auctioneers, and it's still ringmen.
Okay. So
They have like special sounds and everything. That
They
make.
do, and
Yep.
special
They're very
signals, how to call numbers
outgoing
out with
and-
your hands. Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
So, but even at its simplest form, like even if you gave them a glow stick, I've seen the batons, I've seen whistles. Like we did one event and there's 2,000 people in the room. Like you need a whistle. Like you got to get the auctioneer's attention that you have a new bid. So in either case though, that ringman is going to walk up to the current high bidder and they're going to stand there. Okay. And if they're the high bid, they're either going to keep a baton up or something indicating the auctioneer, this is where the last bid was at. Because it gets crazy. And sure, auctioneers should remember where they're at, but they don't always. And so that's that person's job. And then their second job, when there's an outbid, is to convince the person to bid again.
Right.
Okay. And so when you don't have that going on, these auctions get pretty stale. Right. And so at the event I was at, I was like, well, let's see here. I'm in the corner of this venue and he can see me, but he's not turning his head and looking around. I said, I'm just going to raise my hand and I'm going to bid and let's just see how long it takes for him to notice me. And my hand was up for at least a minute.
And that's leaving money on a table right there.
It's leaving money on the table, and it was frustrating, and I felt bad for the charity because I'm like, you guys have got to be making more money than this. So yes, so we've kind of moved past paddle numbers to what you need in your live auction.
Yes.
The other thing I will say, since we're on to live auctioneers, the way this auctioneer ran heads or tails, I hated it. I'll be honest with you. I love the game. I think it's a great warm up.
Right.
But in this case, he actually got people to get up and move to one side of the room or the other based on whether you wanted heads or tails. It was way too much effort.
Lost me.
Yeah.
I know.
Too
If
much
I was
work.
a guest there, I would have been like, I'm out. No,
Well, you're
we're
like,
not doing it.
Yes. I mean, like, you can bring people up to stage when maybe there's like 8 people
Right.
left. Yeah. And there's an auctioneer in town who does some really fun stuff when you get down to 8 people. Like, first person to bring me a $5 bill, is in. Like, and then as they're running around grabbing it, he takes the 8 seats and drops it to 4. Right, and so you get your $5 bill, and if you get there in time, there's a seat, then you get it. That kind of stuff's fun, right?
Yeah.
None of that. So you split the room, heads or tails, and then you kept playing with the beads and whatnot. And then at the very end, he didn't force the 2 finalists to pick one or the other. He let them both pick, and it just so happened that the opposite was picked, and so he said, "Nope, no winner." Organization keeps the
Yeah.
money. I'm like, I'm glad the organization kept the money, but I'm not sure these 2 people are.
Probably
Right.
felt duped.
That's
Yeah.
the whole point of the game. Is like it
Yeah.
should be one person at the end.
Yes. Anyway, I didn't love how that one went.
Yeah.
I like the putting your hands on your head or your hands on your tail.
Trying to make
Yes.
up for all those extra place settings, I guess.
I know.
The charity must have been
Right.
like, no winner. We lost
No
money
winner.
on all the extra tables.
That's right. We didn't assign seats.
Yeah. That's
Anyway, that was definitely interesting. This didn't happen here, but this is something that came up at one of our staff meetings, and I do want to talk about it. It is related to live auctions and consignment items, and I think it's just something maybe we do in a future podcast. I want to make people aware that there are good consignment companies to work with, and there probably are some you should avoid. And I'm not going to mention names on that, but one of the things that I don't love in this industry is these consignment companies that come in and they are there and they're present to help kind of facilitate the sale of their items at your auction. Okay. However, when I see them at the event, I start to wonder to myself, what is your agenda? I get it. If you want to call up one of these companies, and lots of reputable ones, and you want to take on consignment a villa for 6 in Tuscany for a week, great.
Right.
Okay. But when these people show up, I see a lot more doubles being sold. So what does a double mean, or triples? That means that with the consignment company's permission and usually endorsement, they are selling multiples of the same item into the crowd.
Yeah.
And I think that can get massively overdone, and where I think people start to realize, I just need to stop bidding because they're going to sell us 5 times anyway. But at the same time, it does get a little tiring, right, to watch it. But you might have someone at 5,000, then they're calling 5,500, and they get to 5,500. The person who was at 5 won't go to 6, so they'll convince both of them to buy it at 5,500. Okay, and everybody's like, oh, it's awesome. It's $11,000 to the charity. How amazing. It really isn't $11,000 to charity, because that package probably costs $4,000. So it's $8,000 to the consignment company. That consignment company is absolutely thrilled. And, the charity should be somewhat happy because they're going to pull $3,000 from it. But when it gets overdone, that's where I don't like it. But the other thing that I've noticed with some of them, which you have to be absolutely careful of, is watching that consignor go around the crowd and find all the underbidders and try to cut a side deal with them. And one thing I will tell you is never, ever, 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 ever give your consignment company the list of underbidders on an item, because there's no reason they need that.
Right.
Okay? And because the only reason I would think that they need that is so they can call them all and sell them that package. So if the package cost is $4,000, they'll sell from 4,000 up.
That's right.
Okay? And I just think that's lousy. Honestly, I don't love it, but just one thing you can ask for sure. But if anybody ever asks you for the names and email addresses and phone numbers of underbidders, say no. It's your data. It's not theirs. Any thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, when you sell 11 of those strips at the event, and then they have plenty more to sell.
Yes.
The consignment company is doing really well. They making money, and there's a pretty high minimums that organization has to pay as a consignment cost on those trips or items. So yeah, there's
a place for them, right? I
Right.
mean, we're not here saying don't put consignment items in. There's definitely a place for them. Just be a little bit careful on who you work with. We'll do a future podcast on that.
I think we should.
We've got somebody coming fairly soon.
All right,
Do
I love it. Yes,
discussion on that. Yeah.
yes. And when we bring on a consignor, it will be a reputable one. Trust us on that one. Okay, one last thing before we get into the last topic. And so, can I sell tickets through a different system and still use Handbid? The answer is yes. Okay, you can do that. And I know this is a Handbid specific question, but it really isn't. Okay, there's lots of mobile bidding platforms out there that will allow you to import your guests into a guest list. What you have to be careful with when you're selling through a different ticketing system is there's a couple of drawbacks. Well, one is now that user's going to have to enter their credit card in again. Okay. 2, it's nearly impossible for that user to manage their own guest list. And Handbid does allow your ticket purchasers or sponsors to edit and manage their own guest list, names and emails and whatnot. And I think that's also a problem. And 3, it just creates extra steps for you. So you're going to have to figure out how to get this data out of a ticketing system and into Handbid. Right. So I'm sure you guys in the service team get this question a lot.
A lot. And it's once we explained why most of the event managers understand, because it makes sense. When you sell tickets through Handbid, it automatically populates guest list in Handbid for you. Otherwise, you have to upload your guest list from external platform, wherever you sold tickets. And like you said, the guests then have to enter credit card again. So it just creates so much work. And we have great features in Handbid when you just buy a ticket in Handbid, buy a sponsorship in Handbid, and you still have an option to pay later for your sponsorship if event planner manager allows you to do so, and all your information will be populated in there.
So it leaves room when you use multiple platforms for anything. That leaves room for human error and drops to happen and something to happen in the process of migrating your data to whatever you're using on the night of the event. So, I mean, when you're looking into solutions, I would look into something that serves all of your event needs instead of having to piecemeal it all
I agree.
together.
Right.
And here's the other thing, right? So when do you cut those sales off?
Right.
I mean, at some point, if you're manually doing this and say it's 3:00 on Saturday and now your gala's Saturday night and check-ins at 6, like, are you really still selling tickets in this? Like, I mean, at some point, you're going to want to sell tickets at the door. And so it definitely becomes a little bit of a mess.
Well, yeah, I've had every single event that I have done at a hotel. There have been random people walk up and say, "Oh, you're supporting a charity. Well, can we come? Can we join? Can we buy a couple of tickets?" I have always sold tickets at the door.
Okay, the last one on here, and this was actually another one that comes up quite a bit, and this, I think the sales team deals with this one, is, okay, so there's software out there that's free. So why would I use a package like Handbid or a One Cause or a GiveSmart or any of the other ones out there that cost considerably more money, okay? And so free software, and of course, our initial response to this is that nothing is free.
No such thing.
Okay.
No such thing.
The only thing that's free is the advice on this podcast, okay?
And you are welcome.
And even then, we have an ad.
That's right. Yes, you do not have to buy Handbid software to listen to this podcast. Free. I have so there's like a ethical, I'd say more philosophical issue I have with the concept of free software, because most of those software packages out there that are quote unquote free are actually making money through a mechanism they call tipping. And this may sound really attractive to you. Hey, I don't have to pay for this software because all of my guests, donors, bidders, whatever you want to call them, they're going to pay for it. And so the way that normally works, and we're not talking about covering credit card fees, because you can have, and most states will allow this, not every state, by the way, but most states will allow you to have a surcharge to cover credit cards, okay? It gets a little sticky in certain states, but, you know, because you are actually structuring it as a donation, so when, like in Handbid software or any of the other ones, it will prompt you saying, hey, would you as the donor who just donated $100, would you like to spend $103 or $104 and cover your credit card fees, your transaction fees, so that 100% of your $100 goes directly to the organization? And so you can say yes or no to that. But in that instance, that money is actually going to you, the charity. Mm-hmm. It's not going to the mobile bidding company, okay? Tipping is different. GoFundMe does this, amongst others. And so what they do is they will apply some form of a quote-unquote percentage surcharge on the bill, and then the user has to opt out of that. And it's not intuitive sometimes on how you get out of it. And some of these platforms out there are they're starting at 15%. And when you say, I want to change that, your options are like 12%, 7%, other. And when you get to other, I got to manually type in 0 and then confirm that I really only want to give 0. I mean, all of these extra steps, honestly, you know, to me, it's just a bad user experience, a bad bidder experience. And you have to ask yourself how much, so where's the money going? It's not going to you. You probably, as a charity, have no idea how much money these companies are collecting from your guests that you brought them, okay? So that's the first thing is you have no idea what they're actually collecting. And then at the same time, you have to wonder, you know, how much are they, like, in terms of, like, how much are they frustrating your bidders? Like, you have someone that's going online and says, I want to donate $1,000 to this charity, and the first thing they see is a $150 surcharge on top of that.
That's not going to your organization.
That's not
tax deductible for them.
No.
Yes.
And so you want to charge a surcharge to cover your costs? Fine. Okay. What I have to wonder when I look through that is how much money are they making on average? Okay. Well, one of the proxies you could figure out is some of them, if you turn off tipping, will charge you, and use that as the proxy. Okay. Right. So, you know, say, let's just keep easy math, because I just don't do well with, like, numbers in my head, especially in the afternoon. Let's just say 5%. Okay, so if they say, hey, you know what, we're going to charge top line, which means we're going to charge on everything that goes through here 5%.
Yeah.
To you, if you don't allow us to tip, that means that they're expecting to at least make that from your donors. Okay? In most cases, they're probably making more than that. All right. So you raise $100,000 at your event, that company is getting $5,000. Not credit card fees, $5,000. Okay? I think that's lousy. And that's not free. Okay? Right. And so, and I don't think everybody always realizes that. We had a client, she's been a client for a long time. I mean, when I say a long time, like 10 years. She's like, I'm getting a lot of pressure from my board. I love you guys, but we're looking at this other software package because it's free. I'm like, oh yeah, it's not free. So she had no idea they were asking donors for money. She didn't kind of figure that out. Like, let's go to one of their sites and let's show you what they're doing. And let's show you how difficult it is for your guest donor, supporter, bidder to get out of it. You know, and so I just have to say, look, I get it. You're trying to keep your costs down. If you want to find ways to supplement the cost of using premium auction software, then either charge your own surcharge and you get to keep all the money. And a lot of platforms support that, like Handbid supports that. Or find a tech sponsor.
Exactly.
You know, and give them the promotion that says, this auction brought to you by whatever.
Right.
Okay. And again, you get to keep all the money.
No such thing as a free lunch.
No. I know. And it's
Cost
so
someone, somewhere, something.
I know. And this is kind of
Absolutely.
like quasi the Southwest episode because we've been talking about them before. So we're going to talk about them again because everybody's like, bags fly free. Bags do not fly free. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Okay. Go to the airport and tell them you want your bag to go to Portland.
Well, how is that going to work?
Well, they're going to say you have to buy a ticket and your bag has to go with you. No, bags are free.
It's just like the breadsticks at the Olive Garden.
That's right.
You can't just show up and order water and say, I'd like all the breadsticks I can eat.
That's right. Exactly right.
They are good.
Yeah. So bags do not fly free. Bags are included with the price of your ticket. Okay.
Yes.
And so the free software is not free. And I will tell you, in a lot of cases, those platforms are not geared well to you running an in-person event. They're not going to help you with ticketing. A lot of them don't do check-in registration, that kind of stuff. You email tech support. They're not seasoned, experienced, auction event people. They're not, right? And so those are the other trade-offs you have. And so we're going to do something. We're going to dive into this one deeper because the way this industry prices itself, it requires a little bit of knowledge and research about how it works. Okay, and so it's important for us to spend more time than just a few minutes talking about this. But we did want to quickly address free software is not free, and we'll come back and do another episode on why some packages are $2,000, $3,000, whatever, and some are $200. Right. And there is a reason why, and there's a big difference between that. And it's important that you understand that. And if those things are important to you, then you'll understand why some software costs more. And if they're not important to you, then you'll understand why, maybe the $200 software package will work for you.
And there's a lack of transparency.
Yes. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that, right? But just keep in mind that these companies that say they're free to you, they're making considerable amount of money off of your guests. And that's kind of I don't know.
Probably more than you would pay for premium software.
What a racket.
It's a racket.
Hey, can you give me a list of people that I can sell to?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a tough one. All right, well, let's wrap this one up. This has been a great little grab bag episode. I don't know what we're going to
bringing your list.
I know my list, and I don't know what we're going to title this one. It might be Why Bags Don't Fly Free. We'll figure it out.
The donor boarding model.
That's right.
I like your lunch is not free.
Yeah. No such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
All righty. Well, again, if you guys enjoy this podcast, please share it with somebody else. Leave us a 5-star review.
Yes, please.
If you're not going to leave us a 5-star review, just don't review us. Or send us some feedback and tell us specifically what you'd like for us to do better or any other questions that you might have about running your fundraising event. We'd love to chat with you. Until next time, happy fundraising.